Great. Okay, perfect.
Yep, we got the warning.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think we need 3 more people to come back on.
Yeah.
Hi, Erin. Hi, Lay. Glad to see you join. Did we lose them?
They'll be back.
Yeah, Eric. Yeah,
There you
good.
go.
There's 1, 2 more.
I don't think I can stay the full 2 hours. Sorry, Pradeep.
No, no problem. Yeah. So yeah, maybe we can get started as so. Yeah, Yarik, do you wanna start with your talk and the proposal you made? Maybe that can kickstart some discussion. I requested Yarik to put some rough outline on the use cases for phantoms and why he believed that a central repository is necessary and whatnot. So something quick and short.
And I was hoping to have headphones working, but then seems to be it's getting to that microphone, nothing works. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, first I'll say that I didn't listen to Pradeep because I don't know anything about phantoms or physics of it. So I'll just decided to present what I think, why I am interested in phantoms and maybe some results from our investigation or experience, let's put it this way. Can you see my slides? Yay, good. Can you hear me? You're nodding, so I guess yes. So why do I care about Phantom QA, QC, whatnot? And those who don't know me, I'm Yarik or Yaroslav Olegovich Harchenko in full from Center for Open Neuroscience at Department of Psychological and Brain Sciences at Dartmouth College. And I'm involved in a number of projects. And this talk is based primarily on nuisance study talk, which I gave before. So that one would have more details if you would be interested with the study which I did with undergrad Christopher Chang. And of course, all the acknowledgements. But let me move on. So why am I interested? All this reproducibility crisis, and Dave was on the board, so Repronym, you saw the logo, and typically solutions go like, oh, you do pre-registration, then a bunch of other stuff, which are all important, don't take me wrong. But one of the aspects, we need to get larger sample sizes to gain more power. But what is the power, right? This is pretty much your ratio of signal to noise, right? So maybe it's worthwhile also looking into battling quality of your data, right? Or signal to noise ratio you are getting from the scanner, right? Okay, so how big that signal to noise ratio spread out, and Steve Strother shared that nice link on the study, which is from half a decade old, right? And you could see here that temporal signal to noise ratio across those 13 sites, it varies quite wildly, right? Some sites have it like 60 to 80 and some others, it could beef up to 220. That's like factor of 3. Whatever that TSNR is, it seems to be all over, right? So we have a wide range of how magnets could be tuned or how badly they could be mistuned, right? For the same type of data, provide quite different results. And why do we scan phantoms?
Yarik, quick question. Sorry, I did not read that paper, but one thing, did you know if these sites varied the time that they ran these phantoms?
I don't remember such gory detail. I didn't read it in detail either.
Okay, yeah, because that's one thing that on some things that I did back there in Brazil is we ran tests. If you do like something on a Monday morning, the scanner is beautiful. But if you do it like on a Friday afternoon after you're running a clinical scanner, the gradients are all very different results.
Exactly. I will attest to that factor actually later through the talk as well.
Okay.
But that's one of the factors indeed which affects, signal to noise ratio, right? Which is otherwise typically even not people care about per se. Okay, so, but why do we scan phantoms? Or not us, but let's say physicists and technicians. They scan them because they're cheap, right? They don't mind to be scanned and have known stable characteristics, right? Presumably. And sometimes they're fun to build. So this one I built with Vladimir Fonov's help from Legos to check for geometric distortions. And data is there, so you could check it out. It's available through DataLed, or you could just go click and download. Okay, but how stable they are, right? So they have stable characteristics, but if we look at this through time, this is from our scanner, I believe, right? So you could just go to the website where we post all the quality control metrics and summaries and protocols, whatever. They're, you know, quite stable. Sometimes we can see that, oh, they fluctuate a little bit away, right? And what could they tell us, right? So if they change, right, these characteristics, we see some outlier, we are trying to identify the reason. We call the gods hotline, right? Gods, I mean, the manufacturer. We call them, we say, oh, something changed, and they address the issue, sometimes through software upgrade, about which I will touch about later as well, and it returns back to normal. But that normal might be quite different normal from what it was before, and people continue their longitudinal studies. It contributes more to signal-to-noise ratio kind of disparity between different time points. So it just goes completely unrelated or unmentioned maybe to the researchers, right? And what is even worse sometimes, right, that if nothing changes, right, that line is stable, right, it's all good, you know, we bury, discard, or forget about that QA data, and that is not a tale. It's pretty much what happens. People don't keep that QC data, they just discard it because, yeah, we needed that 1 gigabyte of storage for one session of some real study, right? And phantom data is not considered useful beyond QA. So, but we saw that that estimate, right, signal to noise ratio changes through time, right? So that's what the answer, the questions we posed. Why it changes, right? What factors affect that QA? Like, you know, day of time, right? When you do QA, does it matter or not? How could we explain that variance within QC metric? But also we decided to see if we can use QA metric or QC metric as a proxy of effects within real human data participants' data analysis. So that was part or goal of our little nuisance study, which I've done with Christopher, which is post-publication view on F1000. I believe now we have one accepted fully, one with with reservations, and another one not accepted at all. So there is a full spectrum of reviews there as well. So I would welcome you to go there. But in a nutshell, so we decided to look what factors affect QA metrics. And we decided not to go full-scale fishing expedition, but we took date as pretty much seasonal effects, right? Acquisition time, which would be pretty much within a day. Either you do it in the morning or later in the day. SAR, which is scanner, you know, decided what should be absorption rate. Then RefAmp, and interestingly, we took also this position in the scanner, right? So depending on how you position your field of view, you get those parameters, I believe, like quaternion or its rotation plus position. And then we estimated signal to noise ratio on T1 weighted image, I believe. So this is just which are there and what is correlations. And we did really simple ordinary least squares model, and data was just for 1 year. So it's not even that much. So for seasonal effects, we just took stupid cosinus and sinus, and that was our seasonal model. And what was surprising that we can explain it quite well. It was quite eye-opening, right? So R square is 0.5, you know, not too bad. So it's correlation, what, 75.75 or something like that. Although this is not cross-validated, this is just a fit. But even that one was quite surprising. And we looked at which are significant parameters or variables which we added. And surprisingly, again, although maybe not that surprisingly, positioning of that ball, this is just a ball, in the scanner mattered, right? Or how you orient your field of view on top of that ball. And the time of acquisition mattered even after multiple comparison correction. And SAR, which we have no control over, as far as I know, right? That mattered. And who could tell me anybody uses that in their human data, analysis, what was this R? Nobody, right? But that one provided most of explanatory power for what was that signal to noise ratio. And seasonal variation somehow didn't actually show anything. But okay, we decided to check it on the human, right? So if we take our QA metric.
Yeah, quick question.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you
No problem.
go back 2 slides with that fit?
Yep.
Yeah. You said this was quite surprising, right? Can you delve into this further? I understand the high level point, if you can also elaborate on what they do not explain, that would be good.
Okay, for me, it was surprising because, we treat noise, everything which we cannot explain, we treat as noise, right? And if somebody told you that you could take your noise, which is instrumental noise, right? We cannot control, and you could explain it and maybe account in your model for, then I think it's a big thing, right? And amount of explanatory power we've got here, although maybe there is a bug, I don't know. It was quite surprising to me. So altogether, the ability to explain noise through time on our QC metric was a surprise to me. I hope that it answers a little bit.
Yeah, I'm trying to see how good the fit is, so there is no reference here, right? Is there a way we can generate reference?
What do you mean, no reference? So there is actual signal, the black line, right? So this is signal to noise ratio you get from T1 weighted on that ball. And then the red one is the one which you fit.
Yeah, by reference, I mean the one that we know we can explain without noise, in a sense.
There is always noise, right? The question is either it's instrumental noise, which you really cannot control or explain, and then noise, which you just didn't bother to explain, right?
Okay, thank you. Continue.
Yeah, so in our case, it was surprising that we can explain a lot, and we thought that the XREF would also be providing, some kind of explanatory power, but that one didn't, which was also somewhat surprising. Okay, and then we decided to take real data from the studies who agreed to share their anatomicals within our center. So it's only within DBIC from 3 PIs, which I acknowledged in the acknowledgement slide, and also do simplistic linear model on estimates of morphometry, which we get with simple workflow pipeline. And what we looked at first was gray brain matter. And surprisingly, somewhat, well, we should be able to explain amount of gray brain matter based on demographics, right? So there should be some fit, and there was some fit. Our squared value is 2.2, and then we looked what actually explains it, right? So which also makes sense: subject age, subject sex, subject weight, the most important, and then signal to noise ratio from phantom. So if we take phantom data, compute SNR, it explained us some amount of variance within human participants, which was kind of interesting. And seasonal also became significant as well. So when we looked actually white.
What was the, because for instance, often wherever I worked, typically the phantom data, they're not necessarily matching what the exact parameters, like, voxel size and stuff like this. We will have much more thermal noise in your humans, for which we try to do very high res.
Man, I cannot hear you well. I don't know if you can repeat the question, although it sounds kind of silly. But speak louder.
Sorry, I was saying often the phantom doesn't have the same resolution as the T1.
Oh yeah.
And that means the thermal noise is not the same in each voxel.
Yep.
And that also, I'm not. That was just to know whether in your case that was the same or not the same.
To say the truth, I don't remember. And indeed, all kind of divergences would matter, right? Our initial attempt was pretty much scanner has some. Pretty much we took SNR as health metric, right? So it's some kind of, when it's a bad day, it rains, right? It will be bad. When it's good day and it's dry and everything performs, then it will be good, right? And we saw, and we tried to see, does it represent or manifest itself somehow in the data? If you match it more closely, I bet it could get only better. And I don't remember how closely we matched it. I think probably not too close. But actually, what happened, it's not even about gray brain matter at all. It was about skull stripping. So that analysis pipeline was so sensitive to the amount of noise that it was it pretty much was a question, do you select the neck or not? And that allowed, it pretty much manifested itself in, what was the gray brain matter? So, but it wasn't gray brain matter. It was pretty much what is considered the head or not. So, but the point is that taking SNR from Phantom allowed at least to identify, that something is going fish in the data, that you could take the noise, which is presumably noise, right, and explain some variance. But then there is more evidence. That paper, which I pasted before part C of that figure, now it's part E of that figure, which scatter plots, and I love scatter plots. It scatter plots phantom TSNR against brain TSNR. And what we can see that, first of all, there is huge correlation, right? So if you have bad data on the phantom, then you have bad data on the real data, right? But also what is interesting to me, at least, that phantom provides you Phantom provides you more specific results, I would say, right? So it ranges from 100 to 300, 3 times fold. Here it was from 70 to 160, right? So maybe because you do use this consistent median on which you compute SNR, you'll have less of variance, right, in your estimate of SNR. So you could have a better health diagnostic of the scanner than using human data, right, which has also other intrinsic variances.
Yeah, Eric, sorry, Eric, your mic is worse than 10 minutes ago. You did something. Can you go back?
Yeah. Let me bring it down. Is it better now?
Yeah, much better.
Okay, good. Another piece of evidence, also from Stephen's group paper, that they've done it also across different sites, right? And they found that, well, there is lots of variance, right? And some of it could be also explained, but also it's important to look within those QA volumes, right? So not just get across the entire volume QC metric, but look within a stability across slices. And I decided to mention another tale of Philip Zebra from 2013. So it's the same QC we were doing for years by then, or not us, but physicists and radiologists. So they were doing QC. And at some point I looked at those phantom data and I'm like, what are those stripes? What are those stripes? So in physicists, it's normal, it's just what? It's 5% of your signal. Nothing to worry about. I said, what do you mean just 5%? This is our signal in bold, right? It's the level of the distortion here. And this is just mean profile across the ball. And you could see these drops, right? So, and this is Phillips interleaved, which goes by square root of the slice number. So we had this huge artifact, which went unnoticed for years, and not only at our place, because, well, we've tried to contact Philips. They said, then nothing to worry about. Then I had to reach out to Magdeburg, Michael Hanke's radiologist, who had direct phone line with the gods. He talked to them and they said, yeah, there is an issue. And of course, it gets fixed silently after upgrade, right? So whoever got upgraded their scanner, they've got better data now. But if you're doing any longitudinal study, here is your signal, right? You've got higher signal to noise ratio after the upgrade. And good luck with your longitudinal study. Anyway, so conclusions. To me, somewhat surprising was that we can explain, so not all noise is actually noise. It's some signal which could be explained by intrinsic factors of the scanning. Either it could be time of the day, it might be actually humidity and temperature. I started to collect sparsely temperature and humidity sensing in the scanner room. Who knows, maybe that one explained something. And typically, those factors are ignored, right? So as long as scanner performs nominally, nobody cares about phantom data. But maybe they should, right? Maybe it would provide some explanatory power or serve as litmus test to some degree, right? Can I use these slices? And that was brought up in the paper which Steve's group wrote. And what if phantom data did accompany human data, right? So first of all, maybe we could provide more grounded power analysis for studies. That's why I was always skeptical about power analysis, because typically people take, some signal to noise ratio or noise level, right, from prior anything, right, and stick it into their power equation, right, and get, I need to do hundreds of use, right? But that heavily depends on what actually your noise level is. Also, as litmus test, as I mentioned, maybe could just explain some variance in your data. Let's say if you put those QC metrics in your model as your primary variables, they must not explain anything, right? If they explain something, then you better don't use that variance, let's say, especially for longitudinal studies, right? If your signal to noise ratio varies through time and it is explained by scanner itself, it's definitely not your functional connectivity of dorsal network with relation to someone else, right? Changes through age. It is not, right? And maybe it could also help with analysis across data, across studies and centers, right? So what needs to be done, it's pretty much simple, right? It's just phantom data should be treated as valuable to some degree as human data, right? Why not to share it? And we don't have best practices how to collect it. Of course, there is a Burn and initiative and others, but how many centers actually follow it, right? Do we have clear guidance how it should be collected, how often, right? On which days, should it be accompanying each scan or not? Phantom data is never shared pretty much, right? So we share ours. There are some initiatives sharing it, but there is also not centralized anything. And typically it's not shared with data sets for human data, right? And that's also because we don't have centralized storage. People might analyze it different ways, right? Even the same FBurn MATLAB script running on MATLAB whatever and MATLAB some other version, I don't know if it would provide the same results, right? If we have centralized storage and central analysis pipelines, I think it would be better, right? Then we could maybe compare them better and then use them beyond QC in human data analysis. So I think that's it. That's all the blurb I have for you, and hopefully it was informative, and later I'll push it somewhere on GitHub for all the references. Now I will take the questions. Fell off.
Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm convinced. I was starting to look and see if, because I have a vague recollection that the phantom data is somewhere from our scanner. And I was just thinking I ought to look for it. But it's, I think that, are you aware of anybody other than, I mean, you mentioned those studies of like anatomy. I'm trying to picture how, so the data set that I work with the most, we have data from 2016 all the way through now. We're still collecting data and it's on the same scanner, but that's a really long time. And it's mostly task functional data. And I was just thinking, how would I use the phantom data if I could get one from every week?
You would do exactly what we did in nuisance study, right? So you would take the data. If you have functional runs there, I would compute temporal SNR, right? And just take whatever you've extracted in your longitudinal study and try to see, how much that TSNR would explain. And I would also add into the mix all the scanning parameters, such as positioning the scanner, right? And maybe that specific absorption rate, which is also typically not used, right? And see what happens.
So with regard to sharing the data, I'm starting a new multi-site study that follows the ABCD protocol, and potentially, and then so as part of the training and ongoing QA, we're going to collect phantom data. And so I'm willing to work with you guys to share that data pending permissions. I don't see why that wouldn't be permitted, because it's phantom and not humans, but pending all these red tapes, and in the coming months, we'll have multi-site data. It's a limited number of sites, 7 sites, but I think it's a start for standardized collection of phantom using standardized sequences. Maybe we can also reach out to ABCD, because they will have 21 sites instead of our 7, to see if they can provide phantom data. So
I did reach out to ABCD and other initiatives, right? But again, people don't treat phantom data as anything useful or valuable, and that's why they, even if they have it, they just like,
Northwestern, I think we've collected phantom data over the years. I can go back to the archive and dig them out and look at longitudinal changes of phantoms, under one scanner, that sort of information. Maybe as far as a data archive, perhaps we can put it at David Kennedy's Nitric or XNet Central or something, somewhere easily accessible.
What kind of help are you looking for from us, Lei?
Well, if there's a way to tell us, how variable the scanners are or compatible across our sites, that would be helpful.
Some sort of library to process the data?
Yeah, we're going to do some QC on our own phantom data, just to make sure that the data are more or less compatible. Because we will have 3 different platforms, Siemens, Philips, and GE.
Right. So I mean, that sounds like a common, well-tested library to run stats on and give some kind of recommendations based on the data, right? Which is the FBRN pipeline, is it not? So my question to this group actually was, what is FBRN lacking that we need to develop? That is one of my questions to you all.
I would say we are lacking interest in QA data, right? Because as I tried to present, nobody cares about it. As long as it's nominal, it's performing fine, we did QA, all is good, dump it, right? So that's what we should encourage. But number of publications is growing to show, that, it provides lots of value.
No, I think your point about phantom data not being shared is well taken. But also the point about maybe FBRN has not been adapted at every imaging center too, but how can we get them adapted is a whole different question. That's probably out of our control, right? So all we can do is to make the best recommendations based on evidence and make it easy to adopt and whatnot, right?
Well, as there was discussion, right? So different phantoms are good for different things, right? So if you want to optimize, I'm doing this study in which millions were invested, right? You better optimize collection of those phantoms, which you use exactly the same phantoms across all the scanning sites, right? And you collect that longitudinal data. That is one aspect. So if it's a huge study, there better be phantoms which are optimized for scanning parameters of the study, and that data shared along. If we are talking about, I am an imaging center, I scan all kinds of studies, right? I cannot overfit for specific studies, but typically people do these types of protocols, right? Let's do simple, let's say even that FBRN, agar, phantom, right? Good for functional, right? It doesn't do much for anatomical, but as for health diagnostic, even that one seems to be, providing data. But maybe we would recommend, if you use those specific phantoms, right, and you care about your anatomical data or DTI data, right? So depending on which aspects of scanning you care about, choose those, right? So if we provide just mere recommendation, that's already would be step forward, because now there is big ecosystem of phantoms. Nobody knows which one to choose, right?
Right. So this actually is one of the recommendations made in the FBR QA paper that I was reading this morning. They say it is extremely important to unify the hardware and software as much as possible, right? But that said, it's not being adopted. So that probably means that the peer reviewers who approve these large grants have probably overlooked this aspect, right?
Science goes in spirals, right? So some topic comes up and then everybody forgets about it. Then it becomes important again, and we just improve slowly, slower than we could.
And one thing that's important is 10 years ago, we used very, very different sequences for fMRI scanning. That changed a lot. So that certainly needs to be revisited. And how these phantoms behave.
So for us, for context, we actually have one study that just, oh no, I guess it's still going. It's been going on for 5 years that does have phantoms matched to the sequences. And we have one paper actually about how DWI TSNR actually improved case control differences between schizophrenia and participants from that phantom series. But I talked to the PI of that study. He's willing to share the phantom data. I think that the real question is one, like, what's the next steps if we want to share phantom data, and two, the huge human cost of like matching phantom data to the closest scan for the human is very time consuming, and we did it for that one paper. We haven't done it since.
What do you mean? I thought it's just interpolation. That's only tricky in terms that you don't want to somehow make scanning data.
This is the thing. Sometimes in the process of cleaning and or sharing the data, we end up stripping the scan date from either or. And then suddenly that process of being able to match them or use the phantom data properly becomes an issue.
Right. But for phantom, those should be shared in DICOMs, because we don't know which metadata should be extracted and will be valuable, right? For human data, indeed, scanning data is tricky, right? Because it's sensitive. But if data is uploaded somewhere to NDA, let's say, right? Or it's behind the bars anyway, I think that's okay. Then somebody could get access to the dates from there if they need to do some study, right?
I don't think you can still even on NDA, you can upload dates. It's really tricky.
Yeah, it might be strict.
Yeah, no, you still need to strip dates. But one thing that we could do is have folks locally run something and then get the quality control metrics and then upload that with a date. Then that's completely anonymous.
Well, even if you start from the scanning side itself, right? So that was my idea. So we have this QA data. We'll just provide our researchers with that metric extracted through the duration of the time, so they could just use it in their analysis, right? So they will not even have DICOM data. They'll have maybe somewhat even obscured metrics, so people couldn't do one-to-one matching by the value exactly, right? So we could add a little bit of differential privacy noise, so the dates wouldn't be identifiable, and it gets interpolated between dates anyway. That's what we did. So it would be tricky to find the exact date from that time point. But in a second, let's say ABCD study, right? They share their phantom data, right? Then somebody else could go back and look, oh, you used Philips, right? Oh, I know that software version, fixed that particular aspect back then, right? Oh, look, it's in your QC data, and go back to the researcher and ask, could you elaborate, please, about your longitudinal study there, right? Either it was covering that range or across that software change, right? So it's just a matter also of just disclosing enough of provenance to be able to go to the researcher and ask maybe some other gory details, right? Even if they didn't use that QA data in their analysis.
Yeah,
Right, so I think, go ahead, Dana.
yeah, I think it's true. The more useful thing down the line wouldn't actually be for people to keep matching QA data to participants, but for us to use QA data to figure out additional indicators that we can extract more easily from different scanners.
Or provide just quality assurance,
Yeah.
like, let's say, again, longitudinal effects claim to be present, right? And then you go to that center, and apparently there was a huge trend as discovered by some novel QC metric, maybe, right? So that might put the question, right? And then explain why it couldn't be reproduced anywhere else because they didn't have that trend, right?
Right. So I think your point that we need to share when possible is well taken. The question is like, what do we do from there? Let's say, and you all, it looks like we can put the data on OpenNeuro or Nitric or XNAT Central and whatnot, right? Once we collect it, what's the step from there? As SIG here, do we make some recommendations for FMRI QA? Is FBR QA the best practices that we would follow to reveal any anomalies or incorrect analyses? Where do we go from there?
That's yet entire field, I would say, of studies, right? So we could do, first of all, even mention, oh, I have this phantom, you have this phantom, right? You have Siemens, I have Siemens 3T, right? How do they compare through time, right? Did software upgrade affected both of us, right? So there are multiple questions which could be asked, which might be reflected in the data, but that you would get after you have good cohort of QA data. So you could, see which manufacturer provides cleaner data, right? Which scanning parameters affected more or less, right? And then my dream also to do multi-band bolt on some phantom with fake, like I've expressed, right? So, and see where does that one leak. There is like whole sections on the conferences where they show that there is leakage of signal across multi-band slices, but nobody cares, right? Unless you show them like that Salmon paper, which came from Dartmouth, right? Some people consider it the stupidest paper, and that's why it got the Nobel Prize. But it was into your face show of deficiencies of multiple comparisons, right? If you show a bucket which has functional connectivity across its medium, that might provide also quite nice demonstration. So it's just a matter of opening eyes that there are deficient strategies maybe, and they should be addressed, right? Even from that perspective, even if it's not used for anything else.
We're about in a couple of months we're going to run a human phantom study. So we're going to have use 3 scanners. Everyone's going to be scanned. I think it's about 25 people are going to be scanned twice in each scanner, so 6 runs, and we're doing very similar to the ABC protocol. And so that then one thing that certainly that I'll do now is I'll make sure I run a quick phantom prior to any scans. And we are used to, we share all our data, and so certainly we will have that attached. So that'll be a nice resource for everyone, and it will be 2 Prismas and 1 TIM Trio. It's not great going across vendors, but it does. You have the test retest across 2 Prismas, and then you have a TIM Trio, which is a little bit older system, but it'll be a nice little data set for us to be playing around with that. Another data set that we have we have the NKI Rockland sample data, and so there is several longitudinal components to that. So of course, all our data is publicly released. We don't have dates, so we would have to analyze that here locally. But and then I can track down all our phantom data. We have we have the scanner for over 10 years. I can pull all that phantom data and make that publicly available as well. So that might be something of interest to the group here. And so there's 2 fronts, one more retrospective and one more prospective thing that we can work on.
Right. So my question is, let's say for the perspective study that you just mentioned, is there something that needs to be done to improve the FBR protocols, or is something that is not covered by them? anything new that we learned in the last 5 to 10 years? Because FMRI QA has been studied for some time. I'm just trying to see if we can design better going forward, not instead of just sharing what we have that is already acquired.
There's a few new metrics, but they're not super hard to implement, right? It's just like different tissue like different ratios. But for Phantom, I haven't seen anything different. Because obviously all the metrics that you see on QC, they're all derived on, oh yes, but I take a ratio of this tissue on that tissue, or I do, whatever things people want to do. But in terms of Phantom, it's pretty much limited. I think what we have is simply SNR. I guess you've got SNR, CNR, and temporal SNR. That's pretty much it. Huh? I don't know what
Do we have any metrics for multiband? Can we characterize amount of leakage for multiband signal?
Well,
Do we have any Phantom which would allow for that? Right.
I can see why you couldn't.
So someone should
Could
just
do something for multiband. Yeah, it's a good idea to have multiband. That's something new that doesn't exist. At least for Phantom, I haven't seen anything to characterize how it affects this.
I wonder if
I ran stuff on Phantoms for MP2 reg because I wanted to look at the T1 and the T1 star. I was really annoyed that Siemens could get the same values as, spending 20 minutes doing spin echo, and your MP2H get you the exact same fucking timing. So, I mean, I was happy that you can get very good values from your MP2H. It's like, it's very good in a way. So there's a couple of other stuff like this, but they are very sequence specific. Right? But then at the same time, quantitative MRI is coming up quite a lot, right? So be able to characterize T1 and T2.
That would be yet another factor, right?
R1 and R2, I mean, it's pretty useful, right? I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds like something that the SIG can help with, right? I can definitely see an improved F1 pipeline as a need that can compute more metrics, perhaps in a common library. I mean, how is the usage of F1 pipeline? Is it easy, Steve? I think it's probably like quite old in terms of bash scripts and whatnot. Is there some informatics help they can take?
Use Yannick's pipeline. You got all of the same metrics in there. That's what I use.
Say again?
I said, Yannick's got on their website, we've got like some stuff to compute QC. It does that automatically. It's the same metrics. At the end, it's very similar. So that's what I use, but I don't know.
No, so I guess
their scripts are probably too old now,
Right. Yeah. I mean, from a more practical software point of view, I'm wondering if there is a need for better software, so to say.
Well, we might discover new metrics, right, which we will be specific for some protocol calls or specific scanning, right? Bern didn't know about multiband. Now we might need something, right? Across slices, stability, yet another metric, but we need to approach it maybe with the specific goal or specific problem at hand, right? So if we detect there is the zebra artifact, apparently in Philips, used to be, right? What would be the metric which would best represent it so it could be detected, right? Then you add that metric as a litmus test that if your scanner shows it, you have a problem, right? Which will be lost if you look just at SNR because it will be just slightly elevated.
Yeah, one thing
ahead,
I had, and this is a while back when I was a postdoc, so a while back, we were using a custom-made sequence over there in Emory, and it was a sequential sequence, and folks forgot to put gaps between the slices. And so we really saw this slicing effect, and so the spillage effect. And so one thing that we did that was very easy to identify, and this is certainly we can do this on the Phantom, is you create a circle seed instead of a sphere. Just put a circle within a slice, and then do just basically a functional connectivity on that. And so you can see that if there's a spillage effect, and you see that, and that's what we were seeing in the functional data. And so we actually ended up developing a technique to reduce the spillage effect, specifically because there were a crosstalk between slices. And so this will be a very straightforward way. You just place a circle seed, and then you see if there's spillage effects. But we have to find a way of making that quantifiable, and think of.
So if we had centralized portal or dashboard, right, where people could just, oh, this is my text server for QC, right? And then through time, we keep developing these indicators, right, which would indicate the problem, right? So which might not even exist now, but in the future, we could do retroactively reanalysis of data uploaded and alert people that, oh, in your scanner, apparently you have or had that issue, right, which was fixed. Please account for it in your analysis.
Yeah. So that adds to my point. Again, I think this sounds like testing and validation of QA metrics on a centralized phantom data sets, So that means basically I see the need for a common software library, so to say, open source software library for QA metrics, that can operate on, we have
a bunch of those, right? We have FMRI QC, we have your night QC or whatever that one is called. We have burn, right? So we have collection. The point is that different people use different things, right? And maybe they're complementary to each other. Some metrics
actually, that's a problem, as Cyril was pointing out. Some of the metric implementations are different. I think that Cyril was mentioning that before, the way they compute TSNR, for example, right? So maybe there is reason to use them differently. Maybe it's just because lack of harmonization, but having it in one place is better than having fragmentation, in my personal opinion, So the subtle point I was trying to make is maybe this is a good time to improve the FBurn pipeline really well, because it looks like the practices have been well received by at least even in the small subset where that was adopted, right? So this is a good time to improve on the software usability aspects of the pipeline as well when we pick it up. That's what I was trying to say, if that makes sense to anybody.
I don't mind improving anything existing. The question is, which one should we pick and improve? So FBurn, but that one is too old, right? So it's kind of.
What do you mean? Like, I don't understand. Looks like it stood the test of time, so to say. Most of the recommendations you make are already in the 2012 paper.
Yeah, recommendations are good. Recommendations are good. I'm not saying that we should improve that, but we are talking about library, right? Which people should use. And for that one, at least at the user level, what is winning is some container which I can run on my data, right? And that's what people do. But then also, how do you discover new metrics, right? Let's say, again, might be worth just going through different QC toolkits, establishing pretty much a spreadsheet, right? For different modalities, which metrics and which features they provide, right? Either which metrics, either longitudinal or whatever, do they converge in the same results? Even doing that comparison across pipelines would indeed be useful, unless maybe it was done already and we could just piggyback on that. But what I think would be useful to just write a paper which summarizes, first of all those papers which are out there, right? And efforts which show that phantom data is useful beyond QC and forget, right? And that people should start taking care about it, right? And what we come up with MIQC effort, either it will be improved library or centralized anything, that would be next.
No, I really love this need, the need we identified to quantify the slice leakage, the multi-slice. What was the term used? Leakage? Yeah. If we can offer some kind of quantification for that, that would be fantastic.
You could call it functional connectivity. We're all friends here. Don't come up with all these leaky words.
We're going to find out a lot of phantoms that are connected.
Robert has been quiet. Any thoughts, Robert? If you are here.
Yeah, I've just been listening.
Any
I agree
comments,
that
questions?
having something standardized would be great. You know, the analysis that you did for your paper, you know, it seems like just replicating that with different pipelines, right? Because like all the, you know, same data, different pipelines would let us know the systematic differences between those pipelines.
Probably.
As in rerun it on the various data sets that will become potentially available soon.
The tricky part is the dates, right? So typically we don't have access to the dates. So we could only do it locally because we have the dates for the data, right?
So that's weird. Actually, I don't understand why dates cannot be shared, but one of the ways we can solve that problem in the future, if not retrospectively, is to capture phantom data in a bid structure with the neuroimaging data itself. Then the matching happens at source and it's not a problem anymore.
Then the problem becomes that if you do share phantom data publicly, right, with the dates, so original DICOMs, then somebody could cross-match, right? So let's say I shared converted DICOM data and I shared original DICOMs elsewhere. Somebody could take this nifty without date and compare it to my DICOM data and cross-match to the date.
No, I think the original problem Erin was trying to say was the match between the subject and the phantom, right? If the match happened already at source, then there is no issue, so to say.
So that
But
would take.
it's not a one-to-one matching. So I struggle to figure out how to actually encode that.
We just interpolated for the date, right? So we have regular-ish scans. We computed our curve, or not curve, but points, and we interpolated for points in between linearly. So nothing fancy. But yeah.
It's also quite messy with the shared data. I guess we don't mind that much about file sizes, but the phantom data itself becomes a curse on our file system in terms of just the number of, not the curse on our file system, but there's just so many sessions that sometimes you can't see the human data in the way we originally organized it. Yeah.
That's fun. But that data is pretty much shared, let's say, for the entire center, right? It's the same data, right? So it's not like every study needs to replicate the data, right? So you could just analyze it once for the center, right? And you have your whatevers, right? And then you just match to the dates, right?
Yes.
For your specific study.
Yeah, a long time ago, we should have put them in their own project and not side by side with the human data, because now there's so many phantom scans. It's hard to see the human scans in the file directory.
Okay, so quick question. Is there a bids component targeting phantoms?
There is no discrimination of phantoms. You know, phantom scans matter. Just at you have a subject. It's a ball, right, or a Lego, and you just give it a name, and you convert data as you convert any other data, and that's what we do for our QC data. And then you get your phantom bits data set. And all DICOMs, if you use UDConf, they go under source data. We put them, for every sequence, we put them into targzip, tarball with the same name. So you have clear parallel. Bits itself doesn't instruct for that, because source data, I don't care, right? But you can make it pretty much parallel to your human data.
With a few additional metadata tags, you mean, Yarek? Would we be able to capture all the information relevant to phantoms in the additional metadata?
I think so. The problem is we don't know even which matter. We had to go into DICOMs to extract. I've forgotten one of the fields we didn't have extracted by DCM2NIX, so we had to load DICOM and get it out. So indeed, we should maybe make sure that the tools extract all the metadata fields which at least we or somebody else found relevant, right, for analysis. And then it would streamline it. Yes, that's a good point.
Right. Okay. That sounds like an action item, Yarek, for you.
I think, yeah, I can see what Pradeep was saying in terms of matching, because if you think about one ball, that's one subject, and then it's just sessions, right? Then you would have like Erin's data, shitloads of sessions over 5 years of sessions. But then we have this bit provenance, as you know, which is not that much developed, because somehow you want to match that bits particular for that ball, or maybe in your center you have several balls, several subjects with maybe different values, because some are water, some are something else, which is also specific into phantoms, because people use phantoms with different physical properties, which might be interesting. But besides this, so you would have a study with maybe one or maybe two subjects and plenty of time, and then you want to match them to existing other bits, right? Datasets.
Yeah.
But we don't have this. But then we have this issue of dates thing. Like,
yeah, dates is the
how do you
first.
say this bits dataset for session 1 to 10, and or from whatever match this that goes with this bits dataset and these bits, because then you may not even need the actual dates themselves. You still do the dates themselves, I suppose.
Yeah, because you need
like
to.
the sessions, because the sessions can match a given subject, right? The phantom session 1 match the beads, whatever data set of that particular subject. Even if you have no dates, if you have ways to cross,
But how would you match? In our case, it was matched by date, right? Because we take the health of the scanner for the date.
You know when the data creator knows. I'm saying
Data creators, yeah, they have no problem to match. They have dates. They can match.
That's what I mean. It's like how to make it in beads in a way that there is a match that we can indicate, but without using the date. Of course, the data creator has to know the data. I mean, the data creator, there's no other way. It's just like finding a way to do the match without having to reveal dates.
Right. Maybe an additional tag for the bid specification,
So
yeah.
So one thing that you can do is in a participant, as Pradeep was saying, you put an additional tag, and of course then you have to add the tag saying, okay, which phantom session is closest to it or more similar to it. Of course, it's going to be a lot of manual labor and things like that the site has to do. But
everything should be automated. No manual labor. I hate manual labor.
Yeah, I agree. But you can tag to the closest, and so you don't have to put date. You just know which ones. And the thing is, of course, then you're going to have the list of people who have closer to that phantom. But since you don't have date, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
but if phantom DICOMs have date, then you're kind of screwed.
Yeah,
right?
then well.
Or you could find that quantization, right?
The thing is, if you are close, you point to the closest phantom, and this gets tricky about HIPAA. Is like of course, you can't say the exact date the person came in, because then you can track the camera and see when that person came in. But if you're off by a week, there is no
answer. There is no answer. What is that quantization? Is it week enough? Is month enough? Is a year enough? Nobody knows, right?
Yes. What is how much off can you be off?
Well, and to some extent, is this discussion about how to put phantoms into bids a bit putting the cart before the horse? Because I mean, have we established, I mean, it should be an action item for sure, but I can just see, the PI saying, well, why do we have to, what's the point of collecting phantom, of storing the phantoms in the first place? What are we going to do with it? Is the only thing we could get from the phantoms this isn't what I think, but I can very much hear PI saying, well, we don't want to add in checks of the phantoms because that might make all our beautiful results disappear, or things like that, which yes, it shouldn't be the case, but
we had kind of the opposite. Like those phantoms showed up there to make the NIH grant look fancier, even though there were serious problems with the multi-center imaging protocol. So
to answer Joe's question, basically this is to enable analyses of the open data sets, as I understand it. One, to do the analyses, QA analyses within the phantom data sets themselves. For example, a few applications Yarik mentioned before, and eventually in the future, like for example, I think Alex was saying they'll collect some more phantom data, will share them in a way that makes it easy to match subjects to phantoms and to do the QA in a more complete fashion with respect to its actual human imaging data, rather than just by the phantom data themselves. Or am I missing something?
Yeah, I can we just share the phantoms and not the linked human data at this point? Is kind of my question.
I would say so. I would say so.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I don't think we are there yet. We're just identifying the problems now. If we can dump maybe a couple of phantom data sets available, that's already progress.
as for how to convince PIs, so one of them is this litmus test, right? That your data is not crap or doesn't have defects. But another one is improving power, right? I believe Steven's paper shows toward that, right? So if we could demonstrate on some data set that incorporating metrics from QA improves power, or maybe not even metrics from QA, but parameters identified important on QA data, right? Let's say if we add SAR into cross-subject analysis, right? And see if, we get higher, well, we cannot compare p-values, right?
Yeah,
but let's say, still, if you show that your C curve maybe for detection, right, gets better, right? If you have some ground truth to compare against. If we can demonstrate that incorporating data from QC phantoms, either data or just discovered parameters important for that scan, I think that would be something to convince PIs that, oh yeah, we should collect phantom data and we might make use of it later on.
Well, isn't that already well made, Yarik, to be honest? There's a ton of papers showing that you need to do QA, right?
Do QA is completely different from use QA to improve the power of your data.
Yeah.
Because your QA could say, your scanner is doing good. It's keep doing good through all 10 years. It's getting a little bit on the lower side, right? But so now you have some variance, which maybe phantom data could explain in your real data. In that case, maybe quantifying into month or even a year, that's another question, how bad scanner is, right?
Okay, so it is a question to you, Eric, then what currently available open/public data set would allow us to do it today?
None, as far as I know. For our study, I've got, because dates. So we release QA data publicly. That one has dates and everything, right? As for anatomicals, we can release it under NDA. So with Dartmouth, we created non-disclosure, whatever agreement, right? So in principle, I can share that data with anybody as long as they, don't do evil. And that will be small data set. And I touched only the anatomical. I should get back to PIs, and many of them had resting state. So if I could get resting state and also maybe a longer duration, I think I can prepare the data set and share. How exciting it would be, I don't know, but it's a data
Anything else, Yarik? Anything bigger?
Bigger. I agree with you. ABCD, if, you know, in the future, let's say if they do collect phantom data and do share it, then that would be data.
No, I don't
We do,
mean if,
because
I
we
mean
take theirs.
QC?
Yeah,
With-
yeah,
Oh.
we started a scanner that was using an ABC study, and we were using their sequences. We asked them for their phantoms.
Awesome. So we should just collect a list of such data sets, right?
Yeah.
To start with, probably, and see.
are they
which are-
shareable, Erin?
The ones we got from ABCD, I don't know. The ones that we calculated on top, that we got on top of those trying to use the same sequences, yes. Although they had a weird, I don't know. Jerry's here. I brought Jerry from my lab because he's the one who stuck with them. That's the thing. We collect a lot of them, and then we're like, what do we do with them? And we're like, we'll put them in this folder as the MR imaging center. So I think they sent a pipeline. Jerry, did you get the pipeline working? What does it do?
Yeah, we're actually using the ABCD pipeline on our phantoms at the moment. They have a GitHub repo for it. It's called like the Fiona QC pipeline. And we've been running that, but as Erin said, like that data is being generated, but not actually used for any real purpose at the moment.
Yeah, I wonder if we partly just need to bring more physicists or different people into the group, because I'm just wondering if somebody somewhere does a bit more of this stuff. I just put a link in the chat. I mean, I was just Googling a bit on the side, but I can also remember back in Rome when we were doing that workshop, the British lady was talking about what they do. You know, I'm kind
Martina
of wondering
Calhoun.
if we need to chat with, Callahan. Yeah. That if we need
so you're 100% right, Joe. I've been trying to reach out to people to give talks on the side, you know. For some reason, it's almost like we have to pay them $1 million for people to respond, you know, sometimes.
Well, but that may be a different, I mean, that's a different sort of level of commitment than what I was talking about. I was more just, do you collect, you know, what do you do with the phantoms, asking them over coffee type of level of engagement.
Right. So actually,
much lower.
That segues into one of my agendas for today, is to kind of try to develop an outline for a survey to the OHBM community. Do you guys see value in doing that? You know, what do you do? Do you think we should do more? And this set of questions, you know, should we do a survey to the community? Is it useful?
I think that's way too much. I mean, I get too dang many survey emails. I mostly ignore them.
Right.
I mean, I think something like just asking people on Twitter and that kind of level, or just, hey, do you have cool phantom data? Do you do cool stuff with phantoms? What is it? And, you know, point us to it. Or have you already done that level, Yark?
Nobody does.
Sorry.
There is only a handful of people who care about their phantom data. That's why you don't need to go around and ask majority to discover that only 2 people, 100 do it.
Who are the 2 people? How do you know?
So the funny part
is doing.
No, I think one reason to do phantoms, I think many people ignore, you're right, Joe, the response rates are 2 to 4%, but still helps to, you know, there is always some people who reply, you know, and I don't want our recommendation, our discussions to be limited to our bubbles and same viewpoints in a way, right? That's one reason I want to do surveys, you know, because in the hope that people will respond, but they may not.
I would start working on some white paper which summarizes where we are at, you know, what types of phantoms are there, right? What benefits were found, right? What typical procedures are, right? And then invite more people. Maybe they will be just keen to jump on as contribute to the paper, and us get involved.
100%. Yeah, I nominate Yarek to lead the paper.
I'm bad with writing papers. We could try, but you know,
No,
there might be
seriously,
a paper.
No, so Jean made a good point in the group already. It needs to be split by modality because, as I was reading today, I think diffusion and FMRI are two different. I mean, we could summarize the uses for sure, and maybe kind of point to the existing literature and summarize the challenges and stuff. But the whole, like everything about phantoms in neuroimaging, I think is. I don't think I have the necessary expertise to lead that, but I'm happy to help. Right? Because I don't know. Yeah. What were you thinking about the goals of the white paper, Yarek? Is just to make the point, hey, phantom scans matter. We must analyze them more, you know, right?
Analyze first to collect and don't remove. Right? I would say
right.
it would be already a clear message, right? So collect them and archive them. And if we by then have some, let's say, Nitric takes part, right? So how you could upload, you know, to Nitric or open your work, where could you store it, right? If we had some simple portal which could serve as PAX server, or you could just send your phantom data and it will get those pipeline ran for you, right? And provide some dashboard. That would have been cool, right?
David, can you comment on how easy it is to upload phantoms to Nitric?
How easy it is? Well, it's super easy if it's a tar file. It's and it depends on where we want it to be. Do we want it to be into the XNAT, you know, type of archive, or do we want it to be, you know, just source files? So I'm mumbling. So to get it into the XNAT, into the database, you know, type of thing, you know, it's a little bit of labor. The XNAT at Nitric is curated by us, so therefore, you know, we are between the submitter and the poster of that. But that happens either way. And if we can make the instructions good, then our curation can be pretty straightforward. The short answer is, if our instructions are good, we can meet a place that makes the user do most of the labor to make the data easily ingestible, which I think would be critical for any post.
Migrate the phantoms from our XNAT to your XNAT?
Sure. I mean, in principle, yes.
In principle, yeah. I think we've done it for other stuff. That might be the fastest. And then you do something else with it. I don't, yes.
What do you mean by curation, David?
Oh, well, curation and partly is, you know, disk management, and partly, you know, are the TRs and TEs and metadata expressed in sort of standard units, and people don't, you know, mix seconds and milliseconds. And especially in the patient groups, you know, we do our diagnoses, you know, there and blah, blah, blah. So there's a handful of the metadata that, you know, can be tricky in general, that we just don't want to have the image repository, the XNAT, you know, frobbed with user noise. Okay. You want to be able to search for, you know, subjects who are left-handed, who are 37 years old, who have a resting state TR of 3 seconds to 4 seconds, and, you know, a field strength of 3, and we don't want anyone to frob.
But we don't have that problem. All our subjects handless.
Right. So that's yeah, but man, now we have to assess the handedness of the phantoms. How are you going to do that? See, this is a very difficult problem.
Yeah, that's where it gets funny. It's like, that's why it was almost a mistake to put human and phantom in the same data set, because the QA process is completely different. The anonymization process is completely different. And like the checks happen. So.
No, I definitely see a need. I think BID's extension proposal for phantoms maybe, or at least at the data set level, if not at the subject level, right?
I don't see any specifics again. Phantoms is just yet another being, doesn't think
well,
much.
We just identified a few while talking to David, yes?
Well, although nothing I said was really specific to phantoms. And again, since most of our data is human, that's the kind of QC that we tend to need to deal with. Phantoms should be much simpler in all these areas, but again, I don't think it's a problem. It's just making things easy to upload, both from our curation side, because we have to have curation in general, and making sure we're getting the right metadata for the purpose of this sharing experiment. So again, not a problem, just needs to be worked through.
Right, actually, that is a good point. I was thinking we need to know what that right metadata is. I think that white paper that Yarrick was mentioning could list all the relevant metadata, so to say.
But also we need to think about some kind of ontology of phantoms, right? So manufacturers, models, age, right? So manufacturing date, pretty much. So we need to, in our whatever white paper, whatever, and through our collection, we need to discover those details. Let's say I discovered about our phantom only last week that it was built in 1999, right, by GE. And if it's agar phantom, maybe it's not as good as it was two decades ago.
Maybe all your correlations are simply agar age.
Maybe it is thinking. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a case for a different subject number for every center's phantom. Like the subject ID, that ball of plastic is a subject, but a different ball of plastic at the same center is a different subject.
In our case, it's also mixed with the head coil. Let's say if it's
yes, exactly. That's the thing.
QC.
There's all these things we don't care about in humans, like serial numbers and different like install dates and technician, and I don't know, all these things that are not, that we tend to strip out of human data, but is actually what we care about in the phantom pipelines.
See, that is my pitch for BIDS extension proposal for phantoms, what Erin just said.
But how is it BIDS anything? BIDS doesn't care about level of subject identifier, right? So
no, as in this is the important metadata that needs to be shared while sharing phantoms in the future, not with the ones that are already collected,
Fair enough, fair enough. I feel the initiative. So we should file an issue on BIDS proposal.
Yeah, at the very least, if not follow through the whole thing, just mention that this needs to be kept in mind.
Yeah, but best I could introduce it, and we could use my dataset or my dataset, DBIG dataset as the prototypical one, right? Because I discovered the serial number, I know the age, manufacturing date, right? So we could demonstrate on that one. And what is needed is really just participants JSON record or recommended fields, right? Manufacture date, a model, but that's where we get into ontologies or vocabularies which would prescribe that. No, this is this type of phantom. Although we could make it free form, manufacturer, model, and then manufacturing date, right?
Right. I mean, we don't have to go with the best ontology. You can just put whatever we know, and as phantom datasets get shared over the next couple of years, we can probably integrate across them all. So, okay, that's second. Okay, great. Awesome. Another question I had for you, David, was do some pipelines run as soon as, let's say, we upload phantom datasets in terms of FBR QA and whatnot?
Nitrix image repository has not launched automatically any operations.
Okay.
This, as an example, I mean, XNAT can do that, and we do that in our local XNATs. We just haven't done that on the Nitrix XNAT. But in principle, it can be done. Again, as we just talked about, there's lots of different phantoms, a lot of different protocols. Knowing automatically what protocol to run would be tricky. But again, I either within the XNAT or through some separate, data lad, install of that, and running a particular container that is appropriate for a particular, data set, seems doable regardless of if it's within the Nitrix XNAT or not, as long as we identify what the appropriate analysis for the specific data set is, and then do the hierarchy data lad things that we would want to do.
I wouldn't worry even about this automation for at the moment, right? So first could be, get the
Well,
data sets out there, right?
right.
So then manually, even for God's sake, we could analyze them and convert them and whatnot.
No, 100%. But what I was thinking was basically a comparison between OpenNeuro and Metric, to be honest,
But that's what we
right?
don't want to do, any comparison. We
We,
could use any of those, but OpenNeuro wouldn't accept DICOMs, and Nitric, I don't know if that would provide
okay.
a server either, right? So ideally, it should be something which we should eventually, not
Yeah.
now, but
DICOMs are fine for Nitric, and
Yeah, that's
working
why
a little
with
bit.
an XNet instance, then it's the best.
Yeah,
The one good thing XNet is for
preferred.
is DICOM.
Yeah. The only good thing.
So
No.
it makes sense.
And just following up a little bit on Pradeep's comment there, thinking way in the future, is really providing a phantom analysis as a service to the centers. So centers do that. We're trying to get them to do their phantoms. The technician is already grumbling, when he has to run it every Monday morning at 6 in the morning or whatever. If they can just dump that data somewhere simple, and a lovely website pops up and augments, today's data onto that for their site and their registered pipeline, and really remove, other than, all the technician has to do is run the scan and send it to some public DICOM server, and then poof, their website is updated with these data.
Right.
And they can keep that private to their users. They could share that publicly, blah, blah, blah. That would make, I think, buying into doing phantoms. Yeah. And even if they only use that information internally, to correct things, that is still a service. And again, all the troubles we've just talked about in terms of publicly doing it on shared data, is important. And we need to work on that. That's hard compared to potentially using these internally to that center. And now your end user at the center has a relatively trivial call that we could give them to give them the regressor they put in their statistics, that deal with that. And all, again, avoiding
that's actually really nice, even on our side. If we didn't have to process our own phantoms ever again and we could download a CSV, I'd be happy.
So we have at least 2 companies trying to do that now, right? So one is the gold standard phantoms, and the other called Phantom Lab. I think both offer some sort of cloud services. I'm not endorsing them. I'm not recommending them. I'm all for open source and what Nitric preferably and whatnot. So, but they exist. Should we open source them? Is another question.
That's what I thought to suggest to them. That say that we are planning to do that anyway, but it would be.
My question more was, should we develop it ourselves? We already have WebBurn, is it just a matter of making it nice and easy,
Well, ideally, we shouldn't develop too much. That's why I'm trying to not rush it. Let's say OpenNeuro, eventually they do all the processing they're planning to do for derivatives. And then we just establish PAX receiver, which provides this interface to convert into bits and update those bits datasets. Then you have it, kind of, right? So you would just need dashboard, which would visualize and does all phantom specific things, right? So I just hope that in the bright future, we wouldn't need to do everything ourselves, right?
Right. I mean, I'm certainly planning to get them to give a talk, 2-3 companies at the same time, to kind of pit against each other and see who would be more willing to. We should give them some incentive. They need money at the end of it. Maybe there is value in diverting some grant dollars towards that or whatnot.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't mind spending some money and getting some phantom, which they promote, right, and then use it as comparison. Let's say all our 20-year-old.
Oh, so you mean that this can be their vehicle to sell their phantoms?
I think if they're companies, they better jump upon any opportunity to present what they have and what they have to sell. So I think it would be just fine to invite whoever is out there to talk to us. Because you could promote, we are working on establishing, this, and they would all be happy to become the standard one.
No, but that doesn't mean they would offer or they would open source their software library, which is the.
We don't need to ask. First, I need to figure out what they actually have there to offer, right? What is their capabilities, and meanwhile,
Well,
also see what
yeah,
we
it's
need.
basically what David was suggesting: computes stuff, metrics, and plots them. Really, what Steve just left, but the BrainCode platform already does it for various Canadian projects, and I think it's also being used at CAMH where Erin is at. So it's a matter of we could take that and make it better and share it and whatnot, right? We don't have to, unless you think that these commercial people are doing something more useful than working scientists. I guess that begs the question. We should hear what they have to say and let them make a sales pitch. I guess that's what you're trying to say. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm good with it. Actually, we have another person from Toronto, Ali Golestani, listening silently. Ali, you want to say something? Introduce yourself. He works at U of T, I know, unless he changed.
No, yes. Hi, sorry, I was late. I was in another meeting. Yeah, I'm working at the Toronto Neuroimaging in Toronto. And I don't know what can I add to that, but I agree with most of the comments that I've heard. That again, we collect, for example, FBR and Phantom every week, and we process them. But again, there's a lot of data, but we don't do anything with the data. We just process them to make sure that the scanner is working properly. But I know that it's a lot of data that we can do something with it, but we are not doing anything. So I agree that if there is a I don't know, a standard way of processing data, collecting data, it's gonna help a lot. And yeah, I don't know what else I can add.
So, right, okay. I want to ask this question again. Should we do a survey to the community or not? Let's take a vote.
I've got disappointed with any surveys recently. Nobody replies to them, and I don't reply to them. So it just, I'm not sure if it would be productive. Besides that, if you manage to hit some really enthusiastic people with it, who do like phantom data and care about it, right? But
right, so
I don't know, in terms of incentives, like, can we push the phantoms, make a small data set paper out of it, add that table of phantom QA tools to the beginning of this process to that paper?
Yes.
And go from there. And then we can iterate about what we can do with them and what kind of software we can build around.
We can do hyper phantom experiments. If we have two humans with about the same kind of history, we could do functional connectivity across phantoms through time. That would be lovely.
Is there any reason that one might want to do a survey? I mean, my interest is to see where the community stands in terms of, even to make the point that nobody does it, that's it. For example, you've been claiming, Yarik, show me some evidence as a
I showed you a bunch of evidence. Nobody cares.
No, as in, right. Well, yeah.
Ali confirmed it, right? So we have a person on the call, right?
Yeah.
They don't do anything with the phantom data because that's what's typically done, right? Yo could also confirm it, right? So that's just typical procedure that phantom data is just used for QA, and that's why it's called QA. Right?
Okay.
And that QC usually doesn't go beyond basic metrics, right? And it doesn't get updated whenever new stuff gets developed. So and there's a bunch of publications.
if we're in the process of asking more physicists for copies of phantoms, we could also give them a very short survey about where have these phantoms ever been used for other than QA, or have they been used for anything other than QA, to confirm that.
But phantoms cannot be used for anything but
Yeah, but like
you-
did the scientists ever ask you for the phantom, or have they stayed entirely in your space for anything?
They use them when they're coming up with they're designing new scanning sequences.
Designing new
I don't know if
sequences.
that kind of counts as QA, but it's sort of affiliated because you have to have some sense of what it's doing if you're trying to come up with new sequences. I guess that's partly why I was talking about physicists, just because I know they use them more.
Should we contact Siemens and Philips and ask them which phantoms did you use for multi-band sequences? Just my kind of concern came when I went, it was in Switzerland, HBM in Switzerland, we went to Philips reception, right? Where they presented multi-band development. And that's where you realize it's not God's given. There is one engineer who works on developing multi-band, and it's not God's given. He just uses something like PCA, whatever, just to split them apart, right? So it's all physics. But then you realize, it's not God's given, right? There could be all kinds of side effects, and they just keep coming, right?
Right. Okay. Great.
Well,
Can
I
we quickly?
emailed our the imaging center manager lady that we work with, just asking her where the phantom data is. So I'll see if she replies, and because I was asking, over for the stuff we use, so it'll be interesting what she says. If she doesn't reply, there's another person here I could ask. Might be able to get a bunch of it that way, but I don't know what they do with it.
Right. Can we quickly take a minute to summarize the challenges in using phantom data sets, assuming that some of them are shared, like from CAMH and WashU and Dartmouth, for example? Just think about it.
Dates are the problem, right?
Yeah, that's the first
make
one.
them most useful. Yeah, it's and we don't know how much we need to quantize the dates in real data, right, to be useful. So that's yet another research question to some degree, right? For some long longitudinal effects, maybe quantizing to a month would still be useful, right?
Anything else?
I had another concern, hypothetical concern, that I could maybe, I don't know, match participant data by looking at signal or noise pattern outside of the brain, right? So maybe it could be so characteristic. Let's say there was some artifact during some specific week, right? Or maybe specific day. If I observe that artifact in human data and phantom data, I could bring those together to match the date. So that fingerprinting might be possible, but I don't know how feasible it is or not. So I definitely don't want to brain extract phantom data.
Yeah, and the more I think about it, the more for actual incorporation of phantom metrics into things, I think the strongest we could hope for was a federated data analysis type model, where it's still everything, all of the data still has to stay local. We can't actually just make both of those things linked actually public, but we can make the tools to do both and the instructions to do both, kind of the way the Enigma does it. We could send out the tools to analyze both and to match both and have the matching happen at the institution level and then send the results back.
So maybe then each submitter would need to have his data, so data wouldn't be public, right? But under some NDA, whatever, which would allow access if somebody says that I will not try to cross match and whatnot.
Yeah. So even the matching of individual phantom points to subjects would happen at the institution level. And that the analysis that does the matching, and it would have to like federate the result back. So you can send the way kind of Enigma does it, that you can, yeah, you can actually, when you run the pipelines on the phantoms, you can run the pipelines on the subjects, you can tell people how to link things, but they have to do the linkage and do the whatever analysis requires the linkage and send the data back.
So maybe all the dates in phantom data when submitted to the central archive should be also scrubbed, let's put it this way, right? So maybe randomly, or not randomly, but with some algorithm per, let's say, magnet or per whatever, right? So only the researcher who uploads would have them, but then you need to be careful to go through all the item fields.
I think it's fine to make them whatever, when the phantom data gets uploaded, you can do whatever we want with it. And you can even have dates because it's a ball of plastic. And I don't think research centers will mind that much to find out that an artifact existed in January 2016 for their scanner. Like that's the most that could ever be known. But the actual linking of a subject to the phantom data, the minute you do that, then you're giving a mechanism for someone to figure out the exact subject date and time, like scan date and time, which doesn't work with a lot of the data sharing requirements we have.
Yep. Yeah.
Is that modifiable, Erin? Can we, is there some kind of absolute privacy regulation that we cannot get around in the future if we modify the data sharing policy?
HIPAA something, because if Queen comes to the hospital on this date and then you release with that date.
Okay, I see. Okay, that's not a problem we want to solve. Okay, fine. Okay, anything else other than phantom subject date matching? We need to compute additional metrics. Yeah. We can compute some additional metrics like multi-slice leakage that we talked about.
Oh, yeah, but that is not a problem, right? This is what we can get out of it. That's
we can do that.
We need to develop, right?
But we have to develop some definition and validate it, right?
That's so we can get data to validate it first.
Yeah, that's why I wanted.
Well, we have at least one data set now from Yarik, you know.
No, but on that one, I'm not sure if that would be a good one. We need to do what Alexander's group did, I believe, right? So they did that bucket where they pumped the liquid, and then they didn't do multi-beta collection, and that's what I wanted. I just never did. But ideally, that could be a sub project, right? But it has nothing to do with let's just share phantom data, right? But as part of an IQC effort, one of the sections could be also point to the papers which talk about such crosstalk and multi-band. There was just recent one, right? But it boiled down to different full width F maximum filtering you need to do or something like that. So I didn't really talk about crosstalk, I would say.
Any other issues? Joe, David?
Oh, I think we have enough issues.
No, the reason I ask is I want to put it out to people in the notes so people can like share their solutions and whatnot, you know.
Well, and again, I think in general, we have a couple specific things, and accomplishing those will help do more specific things in the future. So trying to stay focused.
Yeah, and I'll see what I can do as far as getting phantom data for the DMCC, because the people involved are really keen on data sharing, and thankfully they're not that worried about the so I've had multiple discussions with the HCP folks about data sharing, and was like, well, what if they match the, these hypothetical matching of anatomies or whatever, and they're not worried about that level of matching. Because Yarik, you were saying that, well, what if somebody saw the surrounding noise and was able to match? I'm sure that our folks, that's not going to be an issue. So I think that even if we don't have historical data, there's a decent chance we could maybe get new data for sharing that might be a bit of a trickle, trickle in. But I'll see what I can find. I'll see what I can find on this side of things. If I can find any more recent, any modern phantom data, for lack of better term, but.
And don't take me wrong, I'm all for sharing, and I think we could simplify life of those, all technicians and whatnot. But my main point is that people should take care about collecting that phantom data, right? And maybe look into using it, right? And for that, we need to provide.
That sounds like it should be a policy recommendation in a way.
But see, everybody recommends it and then nobody does it, right? So FBRN recommended.
No, as in, for example, let's say when the ABCD grant was applied and reviewers say, hey, you must collect QA, you must do QA in this way. And one of the recommendations for QA is that you do phantoms with best practices,
Yeah, and
that's what I'm talking about.
We do it, right? And it's nominal, right? But the question is, what would be the next procedures to ensure?
Right. So that's the question I was asking. Should we update the FBRN recommendations? Right? Like
maybe.
that, what does it not cover? Because it's been a while. It's been 10 years at least they came out, and we probably identified a few other challenges in this time frame.
Yeah,
so,
but I think there's still a scientific argument to make about how much additional power or how much additional signal are you getting when you do this versus just adding a new noise cleaning procedure to your pre-processing pipeline, which takes a lot less human effort, or which can be automated. It takes, because even in that DWI paper, we ended up having the phantom QA side, but we also had just one additional denoising step, and they both added signal in a very suppressing, they both contributed nicely. And the denoising step was literally like an hour of a technician's time versus hours of phantom QA standing.
And Aaron,
is that the Sofia Chavez paper, Aaron?
This one, the lead author was Kajnikov, but Sofia Chavez actually wrote the phantom QA pipeline.
Yeah, I was
that's
reading
the
that
second
today.
one. But the metrics were used, I think, in the Kajnikov paper.
Right.
I'm trying to find it.
From what I hear, I think there is some space to revise, or at least add one or two more items to the FBRN recommendations. Because it's kind of the best practices out there for FMRI QA, unless I'm mistaken. Right? Is there anything else? Joe, David? No, right? So in that sense, can we accept that as like everybody should do this if they do FMRI? That's the question I'm trying to make. Because if it doesn't cover some important points, then we want to mention them, at least, through the OHPM, BPC or whatnot,
I'm not sure what you're asking, but.
Well, from what I understood in the last 15 minutes of discussion was that there are new challenges that we identified in terms of implementation of best practices for QA, right? That are not already covered in the FBRN recommendations, at least the way they were recommended 10 years ago, So that means that we need to kind of make those points and revise the recommendations, so to say, or update them.
I would have to look them up. I haven't looked at those things and I don't even know when, but probably.
Right.
That's a different issue, but.
Right. I mean, many of the things that we just discussed about phantoms were not actually covered. And in fact, phantoms were not a big focal point at all in the discussion, which is what Yarik was trying to point out, So maybe that's one point to be made, besides basic system QA, phantoms can help do more, and we should look at, let's say, point A, B, and I'm just trying to flesh out those points A, B. Like, I think good way to incentivize adoption is to show that they improve statistical power, right? Like Eric was trying to say, that's in addition to identifying issues. I don't know if we have enough evidence to stand by that as part of the best practices, but we could try and make that case,
Well, that's why we need to probably provide good review, right, of all those papers.
Yeah. Right.
Where is Erin's paper? A paper which Erin keeps talking about. I just cannot find it.
Okay, I can.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. I'm like technically star first author on it, and I can't find it.
No, so I added the Sophia Chavez paper to the Zotero library. It's a DTI QA tool / method. I'm hoping Erin, do you think she will give a talk if we invite her?
I tried to invite her to this. I will try again.
Perfect.
Oh, I think I found this one. Yeah.
Okay.
Erin publishes so much. She should read the paper. Come on. 2021 is just woohoo! How many? 20? What's it? Already? Wow. Good job.
Co-author. Yes.
That's better.
Okay, so any other last points of discussion, thoughts, or not? Okay.
Let's keep going through Google, whatever group, although I hate it so much, this Google. I cannot reply from my mail client. I need to go to the web browser. Then all this interface. Oh, man.
No, you have the email address, niqz@googlegroups.com.
I know. It just, Google doesn't like me, and it just doesn't work.
Okay.
I need to fix that dislike, but I don't have time.
Okay. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone. It's been fantastic. Alex was suggesting another follow-up. I don't know if there is appetite or energy or time for that.
Let's get our bearings through email correspondence, and then we'll see. I bet if we start working on some kind of white paper, then we'll have to meet. So it better be, directed. Or maybe somebody wants to. Maybe, Joe, do you want to analyze my data? Not my data. No, it's not even my data. But I could prepare it more or less nicely, I guess.
No, one thing I would be happy to help with is the validation of any new metrics developed towards QA. So.
Then give it to Pradeep. I'm fairly full up. I know I can steal in a bit of time if I'm able to get our actual phantoms, and can maybe farm some of that out to people if we get it. But for exploratory stuff, I need to be honest and.
I can't take full projects, but I can certainly help what's already being developed. Maybe if I'm able to hire a good RSC, definitely. I'm still not able to find a good one that I can take help from. Anyway, thank you, everyone.